Chapter 341. Russell is back. The next morning, Prince Russell and his unit returned to Westover, having ridden through the night to finish their duties and make it back. The warning of their announcement came just after breakfast, while Dominic and the others were verifying the details of the day's work orders with the staff, but before the actual negotiations and inevitable arguments about the manor's future layout could begin. That was the only part that the other two princes were concerned about, as they were the ones who would be assigned to the location for the duration of the negotiations. If they were provided the opportunity to make a meeting location feel more like home, there was no way that they would pass it up, and Dominic suspected that Prince Russell would be very much the same once he finally made it to the manor. However, that was not the first thing on the Signia prince's mind when he arrived. "Duke Dominic, a moment of your time, if you will. Gentlemen, I will join you shortly," he announced the moment he entered the room. Prince Russell didn't stop. He went straight to the office with Dominic behind him and locked the door once they were inside. "I have an update for you. We did not find any more mages. However, we did find many signs of them. There are camps that were clearly human-made, not monster, though they are occupied by monster armies now. Or were when we arrived. The duchy is crawling with monsters of every sort but trolls. Those all appear to have broken their restraints when the mages left and gathered in a single village a day's journey away, as you had informed us. Still, the sheer number of monsters that we encountered is far beyond what we are able to handle. 1,000 men, even if they were the royal rifles, would not be enough for some of the armies of monsters loose within Stantia province." The prince's words came out in a rush, as if he feared that he would lose his nerve if he stopped speaking. "How are your men?" Dominic asked, more concerned about casualties. "Mostly intact. We lost a little over 100 reservists during a particularly heated engagement with a group of venomclaw crabs. Nasty things, and hard as steel. I brought back the materials for the craftsmen, hoping that they could make something for my officers in commemoration of the fight. It's the largest set of casualties that we've seen since the war started. In all, we lost 160 men, including 5 noble officers. It's a loss, but one that was within the known risks when we went out," Prince Russell explained. 15% on a single outing was a heavy casualty rate, especially for men that were looking forward to simply finishing up their assignment and going home. But that was also likely to be the cause of the losses. The men were already looking forward to what they would do when they got home, and weren't as guarded as they could have been. Dominic had faced the venomclaw crabs before, and while they were nasty, against an army of spearmen, they shouldn't have been such a major threat. They were considered a level 5 monster, as tough as a hobgoblin, but that was mostly on their durability, as they were incapable of using weapons like a hobgoblin could. They also weren't particularly intelligent. Or edible. In that case, let's get your men settled in the barracks, and they can stay on wall duty until it's time to go home. Let them rest up and help the construction team renovate the manor. The other princes have some requests on how things should be upgraded, since we're doing a renovation anyhow," Dominic suggested. Prince Russell nodded. "Do you know who is coming for Signia? As the envoy, that is." Dominic shrugged. "I haven't received any word, and at this point, I'm beginning to fear that it's going to turn out to be Princess Alexis, while I'm left to run the house." Prince Russell laughed. "Well, there is no fear of that at the very least. As the older brother, I outrank her. So, if there is no official announcement, it becomes my duty, and she gets to organize the events while you run the duchy." Dominic smiled. "That's wonderful news. I am told that the arrival of Prince George triggered the Axbridge royalty to send their men early. That's why everyone is here well before they were supposed to be. I would assume that the royal delegation was supposed to arrive after the infrastructure teams had finished their work, not before they had even started. But there isn't much that we can do about it now. They're working all over town, preparing us for an influx of residents, as well as the extra buildings for the officers. Once those are done, I will see what I can get out of them before they are redeployed." The prince chuckled and shook his head. "They'll run away faster than even my own men. If they're not already assigned a new task, they will be. Once the rain starts, their job gets busy." "That's a good point. We should have them shore up the river banks as well. They look pretty sturdy, but you can never be too safe," Dominic agreed. Prince Russell shook his head. You can only keep assigning them tasks for so long. The king has an immense amount of work for them to do after the war, and multiple cities need rebuilt. The fact that you got priority for a team is already astonishing. I had expected them to start with Castle City so that they could start to deal with the refugee issue. I never thought of it that way. I just accepted that they were here because they were needed, but were certainly not at the top of the list of people with issues. Even if we didn't expand the manor, we could make do and just let the visitors post extra guards to mark their territory. Chapter 342. You get mail? Prince Russell sighed as he looked out the window of the office. Nothing about this situation strikes me as normal. We're missing something here, and it's got to be deeper than the surface politics. Dominic frowned. I barely understand that much. I get that everyone is concerned about what is going on in Dagos, and with the Skipple Academy's missing members. But I don't even know the names of half the people involved. Prince Russell shrugged. Well, you'll learn them sooner or later. You're in a bit of an odd position. Most of the senior nobles of the region grew up together. We either went to school together or we met regularly at holidays. Our parents know each other. Our businesses work together. None of that is true for you, and now you're here in the middle of nowhere and you don't even get a regular mail service delivery. Dominic blinked slowly. There is a regular mail service? How did you think that we all communicated? Dominic smirked at the prince. I just assumed that you used a magical communication token. Like, every noble should have a whole stack of them for their friends or something. Do you have any idea how expensive that would be?
No need to answer that.
The royals all have a few of them, but magical communication tokens are specific to the receiver and somewhat rare. If you make it that far in your Magitech engineering course, perhaps you'll learn to make them. Prince Russell suggested. Except that most of the ones I have seen are the work of techno-witches. They only work because of witchcraft. That's not something I can replicate with Magitech. Perhaps with a spell if I met the right archmage. Oh, that reminds me. I need to talk to the second prince. He promised me he'd help with the materia gem creation spell, so I can make spell gems. I suppose that I could likely ask one of the other mages, but he's an excellent teacher. He taught me to make mana crystals in only a few hours. Dominic replied. Prince Russell just nodded in acceptance. He wasn't a mage and he had no idea whether that was fast or not. It did sound like a reasonably short period of time to learn a new skill, but little about mages made sense. Well, second brother certainly can make them. He's the one that made all of mine, and I can ask him to send you a copy of the relevant learning materials. They might take a while, as the mage towers are quite particular about who gets to learn what. It's an elitist thing. They don't want commoner mages running around with highly valuable spells, spilling trade secrets for bowls of soup. Prince Russell replied. Dominic chuckled, and the prince looked a bit abashed. You get what I mean. Mages hold a high position in society, but if just anyone had access to the knowledge that they have hoarded, they would lose most of it and face demands for anything and everything, like common tradesmen. He added. Dominic nodded. Oh, I understand quite well. I found the same thing once I started working with Pops. The moment that others realize you have a skill that can benefit them, they often become truly shameless in their requests. The first day that I worked with the old man, there was a mage in the shop demanding that he make a dimensional compass to order on a single day's timeline. Quite unreasonable. How have you been sending messages to get what you need so far? Prince Russell asked. The Merchants Guild. The Castellan is a member and we get regular visits, usually twice per week. Dominic explained. The prince frowned. They come twice a week down this route? How incredibly odd. There isn't even a good road. Dominic smirked. It's an old trade route from before the roads in Signia began to get developed. But soon we will have a road. I've been working on a road-building machine, and with a few more tweaks, I think that we can increase the speed the infrastructure teams build new roadways by more than triple. Prince Russell nodded. If they make you a road back to Limpsbury, it would be spectacular for trade. I suspect that there will be discussion about using the river as a trade route as well. Barges are better suited to bulk cargo than airships, and from Westover they have a clear route with no shallows or rapids all the way to the ocean. If there was a road here from Limpsbury, Bulk goods could travel on major highways all the way from Kynwyn or Witheyton in Axbridge. Then, they could transfer goods to barges to go to Signia City without taking the highway through Dagos. Kynwyn was technically still in Dagos' control, but Dominic suspected that it would not be for much longer, with Axbridge here holding political meetings. Goods could also go the other way from Witheyton south to Wistfield, then Coster to get them onto the river. But that would still pass the goods through Westover on their way. Both major cities needed the trade, now that they were cut off from Kynwyn by politics and a civil war. Without the ability to move their goods, they would be in serious financial trouble. I will ask them what direction they're going. At the very least, we might be able to get them to build a road to whatever highway they reach next after they finish here. But that's a bit of a secondary issue, with the number of monsters that you found. I am hoping that our messages to the Adventurers Guild get a response soon. We're going to need the assistance, and I strongly suspect that there are rules about asking the gathered armies to go hunt monsters for us. Dominic joked. Prince Russell laughed. There are, but I would love to see the look on their faces when you asked. Chapter 343. Watchful Maids. The next week passed in a whirlwind of chaos. The princes had managed to finalize their requests for the new buildings on the first afternoon, and somehow, the design requests hadn't even gotten any major objections from the engineer or the household staff. That had let them get started the next morning, and the manor was very close to becoming a 5-building complex around a large central garden. There was a fancy new fountain in the garden, mostly decorative, but it did have a large cistern under it, so it could be used as emergency water reserves for the manor should the wells be compromised. The final part of the puzzle was the defensive fortification enhancements, which should allow them to call the manor properly suited as a fortified residence. The decision from Alexis had been to make it into a star fort with rounded walls, so cannon fire wouldn't easily get a direct hit. They would also have enchantments placed on them by the gentlemen of the Purity sect, and the wall would be backed up by piled rocks all the way to the inner wall ring, then topped with earth so they could plant gardens on the slopes. That was Millie's idea. At first, Alexis had objected, as the walls were a defensive structure, not a garden. But Prince Fahad had supported Dominic's assertion that it would be brilliant psychological warfare to send soldiers out for fresh veggies during a siege. So, there would be designated pathways to the outer battlements, but the majority of the upper level would be converted to food, with 4 towers to help them spot threats in the distance. The manor wasn't the only spot in town that had received major upgrades, though. The whole village was beginning to look like a small city as the teams rebuilt the old houses and then expanded the housing options with long, narrow villas and a few more apartment blocks. Once the convention center had been finished, the team working on it had moved to building roads around town, and they had become great fans of a simple roadwork machine that Westover had been using. They had commissioned 2 more of them, along with tractors to pull them. That meant they weren't going to be leaving in airships, but that wasn't surprising. There was too much work for them to be hopping around between cities with minimal equipment. Dominic was sitting on the bedroom balcony, watching the work progress, when a maid silently approached from his left. "Do you have a message or a request?" Dominic asked, not looking back. After spending time around them, he could tell who was who by their magic, and this was one of the girls of the Purity sect. Definitely one of their own, and not a threat. "A message, I think," she replied quietly. That got Dominic's attention, and he stopped channeling mana into his spellbook to focus on her. "All right, that sounds interesting. What do you have for me?" "We detected mages approaching. The sect always had a scry for danger 3 times a day, and we continued the practice here. The mages don't appear to be a direct threat, they just have the potential to be dangerous because of their skills. Here, this is the vision that we saw," she replied, speaking softly enough that her voice wouldn't carry away from the balcony. With a surge of mana, a short vision appeared on the surface of the metal tray that had carried Dominic's snacks. What it showed was a group of people, young and old, in tattered mage robes, following a floating stick through the woods. "What's with the stick?" Dominic asked. "They're also scrying, but not for a vision. They're using the stick to guide them to something." Dominic stared at the final moment of the image, then nodded. "To us, presumably, or your vision wouldn't have detected them. Do you recognize the robes?" The mage shook her head. "No, my lord. But while they're designed as mage robes, With a hood, I believe that they're made for practicality and not fashion. Did you see the waist wraps? Dominic nodded. Common enough in the deserts of Axbridge. They keep the sand from blowing up your clothes and give you somewhere to store stuff. Exactly. I don't know of any mage tower or sect that wears such a practical outfit. Those are traveling robes, most likely for a nomadic tribe of magic users. The fact that they keep their heads covered even in the woods suggests they're most likely not humans. She agreed. Then it's almost guaranteed that they are coming for us. I was warned by Prince Fahad that word of our little duchy has gotten around to the nomads, and some are looking for somewhere to settle. There aren't a lot of places that a demi-human can go to make a living and not end up getting chased by guards or shot at. Dominic saw the maid's eyes narrow as she smiled. Didn't you only get shot at and chased by guards in Signia City because you were looting a recycling yard? Minor details. I still had a terrible time trying to get work there until I met Pops. The maid nodded. Alexis had told her a bit about Dominic's past, though she suspected that that princess had glossed over most of the less pleasant details. Should we send someone out to meet them? She asked, instead of following that train of thought. Dominic shook his head. I will take a team to go see them. The sheriff and some of the guards should do the job. The maid nodded. Lady Alexis will insist that you take some of the royal guards with you as well as backup. That is understandable. You never know what sort of reaction you're going to get from strangers until you actually meet them. Though, if they could foresee the most likely outcomes, then this should be a relatively low-risk adventure, as the nomads were intending to stay in the duchy to begin with. Chapter 344. Duskblade Sect. Dominic went downstairs to gather the necessary staff, only to find that they had already been arranged before he was notified. It was good to have staff that knew you well, but this seemed a bit excessive, as if there wasn't really an option. Or perhaps the option was whether he was going with them or not. Now, to see how well I do on the back of a mechanical horse. Dominic joked. Prince Russell gave Dominic a curious look. With all your skills, how did you never make a comfortable life for yourself before reaching Signia? Seriously, I would have expected you to arrive as a wealthy merchant. Prince Fahad laughed at the confused Signia prince. You forget that while nobody was actively pursuing him, he was originally considered to be a war criminal on the run. Dominic nodded. If I stayed more than a week or two in one spot, someone would either send in a Dago's hunter, or the horns would get me in trouble. I had expected it to be the same in Signia, but as it turns out, a lot of things can be overlooked when you can prove yourself useful. Alexis waved him toward the door. Go, find your people and bring them back here. Just make sure that they're not going to cause trouble or freak out when they see an entire Axbridge field army sitting outside the city. Dominic gave her an enthusiastic thumbs up, and then joined the group headed for the stables to get mounts. He got 2 of the royal guards, 5 officers from Prince Russell's reservists, and 1 veiled maid, who reluctantly hopped up behind Dominic, as she didn't have any idea how to ride a horse. Not that she had a great deal of confidence that Dominic had any more riding skills than she did. If you tell me that you used to be a horse thief, it might actually make me feel better about this outing. She whispered while wrapping her arms around his waist. Unfortunately, no. But this is a mechanical horse. It doesn't buck or balk at commands. Just sit steady and you'll be fine. Dominic replied. Easy for you to say. I'm sitting side saddle. She muttered. Right. The maid was wearing a dress. It would be somewhere between awkward and scandalous if she straddled the horse, depending on how warmly she was dressed. The saddle was designed for 1 person and a cargo pack, so she was sitting where the bedroll and supplies would normally ride. A secure spot, though not the most comfortable option. The royal guards led the way out of town, setting a steady pace, a bit faster than a trot for the mechanical horses, but not so fast that it would look like they were rushing to get somewhere. As they reached the edge of town, more soldiers joined them. A squad of cavalry from each army came to join their outing, which turned their small force into a rather formidable one, flying the colors of 3 different nations. Dominic thought that it made them look as much like nomads as the actual nomads, but it would eliminate any chance of surprises when they met with the wandering mages. The group had gotten far closer than Dominic had expected, given that they had been detected by magic. They were already almost within the scouting range of the patrols when they emerged from the woods and spotted Dominic's patrol, led by the royal guards. They waved Dominic forward, and visible relief washed over the expressions of the elderly mages at the front of the group when they saw his horns. "Greetings. I am Duke Dominic Wavemates, Lord of Westover. Our ladies of the Purity sect tell me that you are headed our way." He greeted them, not in the mood to play word games. The elderly mage folded his hands in front of him and bowed politely. "I am Elder Manif of the Duskblade sect. We have come to request the right to settle permanently in your city." He replied formally. Dominic turned to the royal guard and then to the cavalry officers who had joined them. All of them simply shrugged. The Duskblade sect wasn't wanted by any of their nations, or known to be bandits. Of course, the old man could have simply made the name up on the spot to hide their identity. But the veiled maid hadn't alerted Dominic to danger. With one smooth movement, he swung his leg up to dismount and scooped up the maid to set her on the ground behind him. Then, Dominic walked over to the elders of the mage sect. "Please rise. Do you have anything with your sect name on it?" he asked. The elder smiled and pulled a well-worn amulet from around his neck. The jade wasn't high quality, but the age of the relic was easy to see, and it showed signs of having been attuned to someone in the distant past, hundreds of years prior. So, it would be a sect relic passed down between leaders. No longer usable, but a sign of leadership. Dominic smiled. "Well met, Elder Manif. If they come for peaceful settlement, Westover welcomes the entire Duskblade sect. We have newly built housing and high-paying jobs available for your juniors." Elder Manif looked confused. "Just for the juniors?" Dominic shrugged. "It's assembling magitech orbs and devices in a factory. Hardly the sort of dignified work that an elder would want. But it will pay more than enough to support the sect while the elders build their own sources of income and train the juniors." The other elders all turned to face Manif with excited expressions. Magitech on an industrial scale sounded like a much better paying lifestyle than reclusive mages in a tower, as they had expected. But Manif had plans for the sect. "Duke Westover, we had hoped to open a training facility for mages within Westover. Tell me, is there one already established?" Dominic shook his head. "We have no elders to run a school at this time. We have elder techno-wizards teaching magical engineering to employees, but only juniors from the Purity sect." Manif nodded. "Because there are no elders of the Purity sect left. I was surprised when they granted a stay of execution to the juniors. We had thought of taking them in, but we didn't get the news until after the auction was long past. And, honestly, we didn't have the money to purchase them from the Merchants Guild." Dominic would let them think that he had paid full price for the acolytes. It helped his reputation as a wealthy young noble. "Would you care to accompany us directly to Westover now? I will arrange for a proper meal and short-term lodging when we arrive, and then we can discuss the construction of a mage tower." Chapter 345. Inspect the Sect. Elder Manif turned to confer with the rest of his people, then extended his hand to Dominic. "Your Grace, we will accept your hospitality and gladly discuss the construction of a mage tower specifically for the Duskblade sect and the students we wish to train." He agreed. The Duskblade sect began to come forward to offer polite greetings to Dominic, who noticed that they were all still dressed for the desert, despite the fact that they should have left it weeks ago, as they were traveling on foot. Westover isn't unfriendly to those with a few added features. Dominic informed the elder with an upward glance, as if looking at his own horns. The mage smiled and shook his head. "We're not all sorcerers. Some are, but the majority of us are entirely human. It's a practice of the sect that we keep our heads covered. If we were still working as bodyguards, we would cover our faces as well. You see, the Duskblade sect has long been a mercenary guild-registered force, though not a powerful one. Then running a school will be quite the change for you." Dominic joked. The elder just shrugged. "Not so different. Mercenary work is dangerous work, so we've trained our fair share of new mages. Getting out of that line of work to focus on teaching new students seems a fair bit more presentable, don't you think?" "Most certainly. Though I do believe there is an argument to be made that training mages as bodyguards is a highly marketable skill." A few of the other elders smiled at Dominic's words. If the Duke was saying what they thought he was, then they could make a name for themselves doing what they already knew best. Behind Dominic, the assigned soldiers shared nervous glances. The Duke of Westover negotiating to train combat mages was not on the schedule for today. They had been informed that the nomadic tribe might be a danger, but that appeared to be true for everyone but the Duke. Are we just going to collect every oddball with a bit of magic? One of the royal guards whispered from beside Dominic. That is very much the plan, yes. Nobody else is doing it, and I intend to have the most advanced Magitech city on the continent. We're not going to get the people we need if we start turning them away without a good reason. Dominic replied in a hushed tone. The mage sect convoy didn't appear to be in the best of shape, and they were moving slowly as they prepared for the last leg to Westover. Elder, will you accept a ride? I can see that it has been a long journey. Dominic offered, with a gesture toward his horse. The old mage shook his head. I'm not that old yet, Your Grace. It's just that we came across a clan of bugbears, and it took more out of us than expected to get away. How did I miss that? Guards, if you would be so kind. Dominic replied. The old man looked confused as the two Signia royal guards dismounted. But the paladins were quick to move to the mages and begin casting a minor healing spell on everyone who was limping or moving slowly. I have paladins as well as a trollish healer and some witches near the city. We have decent medical facilities already. There is no need to suffer in silence. Dominic explained. He could see that the guards were doing the bare minimum of healing as they moved and checking the mages for distinguishing marks or signs that their story wasn't true. While Dominic's words had given them more work to do, it had also given them a good reason to put hands on the mages and get close enough to properly inspect them. With their hoods pulled low, it was difficult to tell who was who, but as they moved, they found that the core of the group was made of elderly women and children, surrounded by the more powerful mages, with the male elders out front. But the old women had some powerful magical jewelry on. They might not be just the wives of the elders, they were most likely sect elders themselves, and disguised as helpless old women as they protected the young ones. That told the paladins that these mages were still organized and didn't have that defeated mindset that many refugee groups got after even a few weeks on the road. Even after battle, and lacking healing, they were still combat-ready and in defensive formation. My lord, the healing is done. Everyone should be ready to move. Dominic nodded, then mounted his horse, and helped the maid up behind him. It's not far to Westover now. They will be expecting us, so we should get moving before dinner gets cold. Elder Manif smiled. The kitchens would never let a duke's dinner get cold, even if they had to make it 6 times. That was one of the perks of rank and wealth. But what he didn't know was that these royal paladins weren't assigned to him. They were for Alexis. When it came to the more important person in the house, it was unlikely that most of the staff would say that it was the Duke and not the Duchess. If he was in trouble with Alexis, the kitchen would almost certainly side with her and make him eat a cold dinner for being late. Dominic kept the horse to a slow walk, so he could pace beside Elder Manif, who had many questions. Lord Dominic, have you had training as a mage as well? I can feel that your inner mana level has progressed much more than average. He asked. Not formally. I do have a fair number of spells available, but mostly the ones available to soldiers, plus a few utility ones, as I took blacksmithing as a trade. Once you are settled in, I may come for some additional courses. One of the things I would like to learn is the art of materia gem creation, so I can recreate crystals and spell gems. It would greatly benefit my Magitech orb creation attempts. He explained. That took the elder by surprise. The Duke wanted to learn to make highly advanced Magitech orbs. Not many high nobles kept up the trade skills of their youth once they had the title. Chapter 346, Teaching Opportunity. Dominic shrugged when he saw the man's confusion. Hobbies are good for a man to have, and I have a knack for Magitech orbs. You'll see once we arrive in town, but I also had some success making new Magitech for the military during the conflict with Dagos. Elder Manif nodded. I have heard about that. It is said that the Signia army advanced remarkably quickly during the conflict, and that they made a Duke of a Wavemates prince for your contributions. It's not common knowledge out in the desert just what those contributions were, but given your lineage, it seems more likely that they were magical than anything else. That's why I had asked if you were formally schooled. Dominic sighed dramatically. Sadly, the horns refused to be hidden, and no respectable facility would take me as a student during my youth. The elder's face wrinkled with suppressed laughter at Dominic's description of the situation. The horns weren't so much the problem as his reputation and name. Many sects quietly took in sorcerers of various sorts, but nobody wanted to be the sect caught harboring a war criminal. However, if Signia had not realized who he was, or if they had decided that it was less important to consider his past than his present capabilities, then they would mention that the Duke's reputation was absolutely terrifying. So, they ignored the obvious. It shouldn't be an issue to send a tutor to the manor to assist in your studies, Your Grace. We've got many skilled candidates. Though, it seems you've found some assistance already. Elder Manif replied, with a glance at the veiled maid. Not so much. This lovely lady is not my tutor, but an acolyte of the Purity sect, and now a veiled maid in the employ of the duchy. My wife, Princess Alexis, has a particular preference for skilled help. That caused hushed whispers through the sect. The Duchess was not only a princess, but she was forming a veiled maid force. In normal circumstances, that just meant that they were not ladies-in-waiting and kept their faces covered to avoid attracting suitors. But the way that Dominic said it implied that it was more than just that. If the princess was really reforming the old assassin force, they had candidates who would eagerly apply for the training. They were a mercenary sect at their core, and a lifelong appointment as a royal lady's veiled maid would be a dream job for many of them. Perhaps the Duke needed a butler student? The position of butler normally went to a most trusted and capable confidant, often someone who missed out on a royal guard appointment, or who had retired from such a position. It took years of training and memorization of all the nobles' personal preferences, as well as political alliances in real time. But it was also a highly respected lifelong appointment. However, if one of their acolytes was chosen to train for the position under a new duke, who surely needed people, they had a good chance of getting the job. The elder's mind was racing with possibilities that came to a crashing halt when he saw the assembled armies outside Westover. Your Grace, are you under siege? He stammered. Oh, right. I forgot to mention the soldiers. No, we're not under attack. We have royal guests from Mitfield and Axbridge currently at the manor, and their men are stationed outside the city. They're not hostile. Dominic explained. The aging mage clutched his chest as he slowed his breathing. Good. You had me concerned there for a moment. I can guess what the situation is, given recent events. Where did you have available for us to set camp? He asked. Within the manor walls. There is a large clearing near the hay fields where you can set up, and then we will arrange a meeting with the infrastructure teams about building a mage tower and school. Behind Dominic, the mage shifted to whisper in his ear. Get them to teach everything. A mage school attracts a lot of attention, but a private academy that also teaches courses on magic is more subtle. Dominic nodded slightly, so she could see that he understood. The procession stopped at the walls, and the Duskblade sect paused for a moment to take in the defenses of a keep. It was beautifully done, but the magic suggested that it was not elders of a mage sect who had done the defensive magic. That was true. It was techno-wizards and the workers of the infrastructure team, plus the acolytes of the Purity sect. However, it was sturdy and well-designed. The defensive fortifications were recently reconstructed, but the manor is well-equipped to handle guests. Please do come in. Dominic explained. Your Grace, might I ask why you opted not to have a moat? One of the elders asked as they approached the gates. The foundations of the keep are deeper than the water level, difficult to undercut. But the primary reason was practical. I have a sensitive nose, and I don't like the smell of stagnant water. Dominic replied. The elder nodded, then smirked when one of his companions pointed up at the walls, where riflemen with Magitech rifles stood guard. The logic of a magical fortress was not that of a standard fortress. You didn't keep a moat, you added one when you needed it. For a keep full of magic users, digging a 3-meter trench around the walls and filling it with water was not an impossible task. It implied that they didn't expect to be attacked by a force that could overrun them before they could set proper defenses, but with 20,000 soldiers outside of town, that was probably true until the royal guests that Duke Dominic had mentioned were gone. Dominic let the maid down, and she silently signed to him. I will go find Beth and get some soup. Fresh bread as well, if they have it. Dominic nodded. I will settle them by the fields and then calm the goats. Letting the territorial horned menaces loose on guests would just be bad manners. Chapter 347. To become a true power. The goats proved to be much more friendly toward the newly arrived mages than expected. Instead of their usual territorial challenges, they simply accepted that the sect was setting up in the field next to the hay and pointedly ignored them after a few disinterested glances. If you would like to send a few elders in after dinner, we can discuss your choices of locations, as well as the requests that I would make of your school. You see, we would like you to teach more than just magic. If the Duskblade sect teaches more than just magic, it will help reduce the need for a second school within the town and give you an opportunity to build connections with more than just the mages of Westover. Normally, mages are sent for training after the age of apprentice selections. Not only does that cause many potential mages to end up in family trade skills that they are poorly suited to, it also reduces the quality of both mages and tradesmen. The school will have to hire teachers for subjects that the sect doesn't specialize in, but I'm sure that shouldn't be too big of an issue for you. Dominic paused, and the elders nodded. Indeed. At one time, we did hire instructors for the essential skills of a mercenary. Now, we have teachers for all of the skills that we traditionally taught. But just to be clear, you would like us to run a primary school. A school for young children? Not just them, but yes. I want you to run a school for young children, and then keep on the ones with promise as mages or mercenaries. The city guard will take some of them off your hands at the end of training, and the Signia army will likely take the rest if they're willing. There shouldn't be a shortage of employment. But if you also have teachers for other useful skills around town, you can get the children prepared for life in a Magitech society before they start officially training for their career. You see, I would like everyone in town who has the magic to be able to at least do the basics for themselves. Dominic explained. Elder Manif nodded eagerly. I think that I get what you're going for. There is a mage sect in Wigravia that is the size of a city. They train their acolytes to do everything that the city needs, and then promote the more powerful to higher ranks with better training and more access to resources. But if we copy that format without making everyone part of a mage sect, we can have a whole city with the skills to work at a Magitech factory, operate magical items without fear of self-harm, and even cast some basic magic. It might not replace the need for a mage tower, but simple things like a torn coat would no longer need to go to the tailor if they knew mend item. Even just having the basic knowledge of runes and theory to make a Magitech orb would let them work at one of the factories with days instead of weeks of training. Dominic nodded. Exactly. We're starting with simple items and a repair stop for the Magitech carriages. But as we get more people, that will naturally expand. Soon, we will be the manufacturing hub for the entire eastern side of the continent. Elder Manif smiled. Bold words. But I mean them. If we're making the finest soldiers, vehicles, and housewares on the continent, it wouldn't take much to become a household name in a better way than the memories of the invasion. Dominic explained. The maids came out with a large cauldron of soup and a bag full of freshly baked bread. Miss Beth in the kitchen knew that you were coming, so she prepared. The maid explained. Thank you. Elder, we can discuss more while we eat. Please call everyone over. The Duskblade sect was just completing their work, and a cluster of yurt-style tents were erected, finishing with a portable stone fire pit designed to prevent ashes or burnt rings on the ground that would indicate recent camp activity. Elder Manif set out a ring of chairs around the fire pit with what Dominic recognized as a spell, not stored items from his storage ring. Nice trick. He noted. Elder Manif smiled. We found that it's the best way. If we're not carrying anything permanent, then there is nothing to take from us if we are captured. The tents are kept with the camp followers, not the active sect members on assignment. When they go out, they use magic to set up their camps, so they're carrying nothing but clothes and food. A trained mage wouldn't even need to carry a weapon. They could make one when they needed it. Even a common belt knife, which wouldn't attract attention anywhere, would become the sharpest of swords in the hands of a battle mage. For that reason, many mages were known to simply carry a false wand. They could use magic to turn the stick into whatever they needed, and even if it was taken from them, it was no real loss. The captors would think that they had disarmed the mage, But in reality, the stick was just a prop, and the blade's spell could be cast in the mage's hand just as easily, giving him the blade that they had tried to remove from him. Or her, Dominic mentally amended. Most of the women in the group had the hardened faces of people who knew what hardship and combat were all about. The maids served the elders, while a sect acolyte served everyone else, and one of the elderly ladies of the Duskblade sect stared intensely at Dominic. "Is there something amiss?" he asked cautiously. "Your face. I know that you're a young dragonkin, and I would have placed you in your late teens if I didn't know how old you were. But there isn't a mark on you. Not your face, your hands, your arms. Not even an old callus," she explained. Dominic shrugged. "I'm a bit too dragon for that. I heal quite well, and it doesn't leave scars." He would skip over the part that even if he did let it heal naturally and scar, it would fade the next time he killed something with an arcane blast. Chapter 348. Innate Levels. The smiles on the elders' faces grew as Dominic spoke, and the old woman nodded in satisfaction. "I knew that we had come to the right place. Now, I do hope that you don't mind a personal question." Dominic chuckled at the hesitant look on her face. "As long as it's suitable for public consumption, I will likely answer." "Your eyes glow a little when you are curious. Do you transform when you get excited? I don't mean a full shift, but perhaps some scales on your body or fully glowing eyes," she asked. Dominic nodded, then contemplated how much to tell these new arrivals. His claws weren't exactly a secret. That should be fine to inform them. "When I need them, I can grow out my claws. It's retracting them that become the issue. Growing them is easy, but half the time I end up having to file them down into fingernails again." The old woman gripped her spoon so hard her knuckles were turning white. "Really? That is wonderful. So much dragon blood left in your lineage. Does your wife know?" Dominic tried not to laugh. "Oh yes, she is well aware. But the eyes glow as well, and that's not something that anyone can hide from their spouse." "How is your magic? We can help you train once the tower is up," she asked slowly, the excitement having drained much of her energy. "My spell selection is limited, but I am at level 13 now with my core skills." The old woman nodded. "What is your base level?" Dominic shrugged. "I have no idea. I've been focusing on improving my magic, and I haven't tested it. It's more efficient to funnel mana directly to the spells instead of making mana gems and then transferring them." "Oh, you must be friends with the second Prince of Signia then? He's one of the few high mages who can use that technique." Elder Manif asked. "Well, I did marry his sister. But yes, you could call us friends." The elder smirked and patted Dominic on the shoulder. "Fear not. Any harsh feelings about taking away his sister will fade with time. My father-in-law was the previous sect master, and it took him nearly a decade to accept that his little girl was all grown up." Dominic laughed. "It's not the second prince I am most concerned with. It's the crown prince who is unlikely to accept that his most precious sister is a married woman. Even Prince Russell was abrupt when we first met. Princess Alexis remains a favored daughter among the militant members of the Signia royalty, and the thoughts of anyone spending husbandly time with her puts her brothers into full protective mode." Dominic caught the sound of the maid's laugh before she stifled it. Indeed, most of the reason that Russell had been harsh with Dominic when they first met was because he had viewed him as the usurper who had the audacity to steal his sister. According to Alexis, the soft and feminine sisters were more ornamental to the princes, always intended to be married off into good families to ensure their future. But the twin princesses were different. More like one of the brothers, as well as battle comrades, who had seen dozens of fights at the prince's sides. Now they were both to be married women and moved away from the palace. Princess Eleanor had better not be getting notions of marriage any time soon. She was the last of their little sisters to dote upon. Having listened to the conversations between the princess and her brother since he arrived, the maid knew that the nostalgia for childhood good times was strong with Prince Russell. He was not ready for the change of generations yet, where all his childhood friends became right proper noble adults, taking over from their parents. "Why don't we test your innate level? It will help develop a plan to assist your development as Duke." "Or were you not planning to become a master mage?" Elder Manif asked. "Indeed, I am intending to be a master mage at some point. A master blacksmith as well, but that's becoming more of a hobby than a trade, as I focus more on magitech engineering and magic. Dominic agreed. The mage shrugged. Even a mage tower needs a mastersmith if they can get one. The two aren't mutually exclusive, though your growth rate might be slower with a blacksmith's trade skill orb than an archmage's gift. All right, what do we need to do? Dominic asked. Put your hands against mine and push as much mana as you can toward me. It's unlikely that you'll be able to overpower me in a mana wrestling match. I'm a level 30 mage. Elder Manif explained. And his mother was half siren. His magical affinity was extremely high, though he hadn't inherited any of her non-human appearance. Dominic put his hands against the elders and then pushed. He could always move a large amount of mana, but this was a test of pressure, not volume. The elder braced himself as Dominic did his best, arms trembling with effort as their mana collided. Then, Elder Manif nodded, and Dominic stopped the effort. That is truly impressive. I would put you at level 4 on an innate level. That is far beyond what most can claim at your age, and more than 90% of human archmages. Even the second prince should only be a little stronger than you on an innate level. However, his trade skill core and his practical level are far beyond either of us. When it comes to mages, I have an advantage due to bloodline in that my innate level and practical level are the same. But I am also an old man. By the time that you or the second prince are my age, you will be the same. Well, assuming that the royal Signia bloodline is strong enough in the second prince. If not, his innate level will stop far short of his trade skill peak. The common name for it is reaching your potential. But really, it's closer to being a sign that you're reaching the end of your lifespan. Your body is giving all that it can give, and you've accomplished everything it had the potential to. So, the only way forward is down. The elder elaborated with a sigh. Chapter 349. Many good years. Dominic patted the elder on the shoulder. Don't be too harsh on yourself. I'm sure that you've got many good years left ahead of you. Elder Manif smiled indulgently. Soon, my level will start to degrade. But it hasn't yet. Fortunately for me, with my mixed bloodline, I have made it to level 30. At the usual rate of a year or 2 per level, I'll have decades to pass on my wisdom before it's my time. The elderly woman beside him gave him a sly wink. At least now that we're settling in a civilized city. No need to fear ambushes by bandits or wild monsters here. Letting declining elders be the rear guard is all well and good in the desert, but we shouldn't have to do any running away once we get a tower built. Tell me, Duke Dominic, did you have a particular spot in mind? She asked. Dominic took out his map of the village. I actually do. There is a nice hill just outside the town's main residential zone, and it's all stone. No matter how good our Millie is, she can't grow crops on bare rock, and it's higher ground, so there is little to no chance of flooding. Well, this river rarely floods to begin with, as you can see by the state of the grounds after a decade left unattended. But it's an excellent spot for a mage tower and school. It's easy to find, far enough from town that you can build outdoor training areas without feeling cramped, but close enough that kids from town can walk back and forth every day. They might not like walking most of a kilometer in the rain, but they'll get used to it eventually. The elder smiled, while the maid laughed softly. Getting stuck out in the rain while working was an essential part of nearly every job that most commoners would have. Whether you were walking to and from work or actually working outdoors, you had to learn to get used to the weather. Jobs like the blacksmith, who lived in his nice warm forge, were exceedingly rare. Just the fact that their homes were going to have constant heating without worrying about the cost of wood was going to change lives in Westover. Normally, when times got tough, there was a choice between being warm or being well-fed. But with a Magitech fireplace, the dilemma was just about how well-fed you could be on a limited budget. The elders examined the map, with its markings for what fields were currently worked and what farmhouses were occupied. The area around town is coming along quite well. But can I ask why you chose to put the closest barrens so near? Elder Manif asked. Practicality. We're under threat from wild monsters, and there are no nearby cities or forces to assist us most of the time. So, I had them settle where they were within easy rescue range. Their holdings might be rather small, but that's the size they were under Wavemate's leadership, and it was enough. If it's not enough now, we can expand them outward to cover more territory, while the core of the duchy's income will be the town itself. Manif nodded and examined the map again. That makes sense. I had forgotten how remote this region was. It's a bit like being back in the desert, with nobody for dozens of kilometers in any direction, except that the land is so much more fertile. I see elevation marks for a large terraced hill here. What are they growing? Rice, he asked. Wine grapes. We have rice fields down by the river, where they can be deliberately flooded with the irrigation canals. But it's not one of our primary crops. Most of the farmers are growing grains and potatoes to go with their vegetables. The other elders nodded and mumbled to themselves as they examined the area. Yes, this will be best. Our school won't bother the farmers, as none of the crops are ones that react negatively to nearby mana use. It will take us some time to build a whole school complex, but we have the talents ourselves if you want to leave it to us. Manif suggested. I will send some men from the Royal Infrastructure team with you. They are experts in the field, and they can assist, while also relaying any updates on the school's likely requirements. I know that the king has standards for school's insignia, but I don't personally know what they are. Dominic explained. Right, it wouldn't do for us to be accused of substandard education or facilities. We wouldn't turn down the help of experts anyhow. While we have the spells to build a home, none of us have much experience with it. The mages only learned it to repair damages that they have done during a fight, so that their intrusions aren't immediately detected. That was one way to use construction magic, for sure. The logic of nomadic mercenaries wasn't the same as that of the infrastructure group, so letting them both work together might just lead to something wonderful. Even the strangest of new ideas could lead to innovation, and having so many mages in town at once was going to save them months or years of work. This should work out nicely. I will have someone come over to show you the location in the morning, and the sect can get started on the tower. But for tonight, enjoy yourselves. The elders are invited for dinner in the manor, but we unfortunately don't have the seating for the whole sect. Dominic offered. That is more than generous. Thank you, Your Grace. We will humbly accept your invitation. The sect is fast to get settled, and most of us will turn in early tonight, after such a long journey. Might I ask what the dress code will be? Elder Manif asked. Noble casual. Just put on your better robes, and you'll be fine. We don't stand on ceremony. In the Wavemates tradition, there are both common men and royals at the same table, so you won't be underdressed. Chapter 350. Reasonable Requests. Dominic returned to the house to find Pops flirting with Beth, while Mead sat at one of the counter-height chairs, helping roll dough into balls for dinner buns. Expect 8 elders of the Duskblade sect for dinner, on top of the other guests. He informed the cook, who seemed a bit relieved that Dominic hadn't invited half the sect. He had already gotten her to serve 100 liters of soup plus all of her pre-made bread loaves today, so being able to cut back a bit would be a relief. Dominic smiled at the cook. Don't let my unreasonable demands make you think that I don't appreciate all that you do for us. Having so much food ready when the guests arrived was wonderful. The Duskblade sect has been following a magical guiding spell since they left the western deserts of Axbridge, and a proper sit-down meal made their whole week. They will be staying in the courtyard for some time, while they build a new school and mage tower outside of town. We needed somewhere to educate the children, and they have the educated people to do the job. Beth nodded. That should work out well. If they can get the school built before the rains get too bad, then the children can start their education while work on the farms is slow. It's a bit late for the typical Signia school schedule, but close enough that they're not losing a whole year. Not that most of them would have gone to a fancy formal school to begin with. Pops laughed at the thought of every farmer sending their kids to school full-time. Most of them hardly taught the kids to read. Dominic understood his laughter and shrugged. We haven't worked out a schedule, but I wanted the kids to at least learn enough that they wouldn't get left behind in a town that is beginning to focus on magitech factories. We will need a new generation to keep things running, and a mage tower-run school will do that. As long as they can all read, and they learn enough to take on a trade, it will be enough for me, but the trades we are going to have will require higher than usual standards. Pops nodded. That makes sense. Already the ones working at the factory making jars are getting excited about making fireplaces and about seeing the steam tractors pull in. It won't be long before we've got them clamoring for raises and more training, so they can also work with a carriage maker to fix steam vehicles. Then someone will want to make them ourselves, and we will be building more factories. Beth winked at Pops. Sounds like your perfect town. Nothing but the ringing of hammers on metal and a bit of magic in everything. Pops chuckled and smoothed his beard. Well, I can't argue with that. Town is better with a touch of magic to it. Dominic left the pair to their strange flirting and ignored Meade's pleading look for him to stay and help with the dinner buns. There were already 3 other maids in the room making the dough balls. They didn't need any more hands. Meade just wanted a distraction, since there was no room to work at the main table, and she was stuck at the counter next to Pops and Beth. Prince Fahad joined Dominic in the sitting room as soon as he left the kitchen, and poured them both a drink. I hear that the Duskblade sect are making themselves comfortable in the far fields. My soldiers were startled to see so many mages in one spot, but it looks like they're not going to cause any trouble. He began. Very little, I am certain. The real arguments will begin when it comes time to work out the curriculum for the school. They're used to training mercenary battle mages, and we're going to send them school children with a future in the factories. Dominic agreed. The prince nodded. I can see that becoming an issue. Their sect is one that is familiar to me. I looked them up when the officers informed me of their identity. They are one of many nomadic mage clans, small but strong enough that they never turn to banditry. Some of their members are on wanted lists for unsavory mercenary jobs and assassinations, but the sect itself isn't known to cause troubles. They didn't try to hide their sect's nature. They were open from the start about what sort of sect they were. I think that it might work out in our favor. They can do some additional training for our guardsmen. We're soon to be short on town guards again with the way that the town is expanding, and I intend to have them help train the next batch. A week or 2 with the mages, a month or 2 with the general, and we should have guardsmen that can deal with anything that comes their way. Then we can start adding battle mages to the town guard as well, so that we can send patrols with a mage. If I recall, that is a common practice in all of Axbridge, isn't it? Dominic asked. He had stayed away from the bigger cities as they spelled trouble for him, but it was common practice in the less populated western regions. It is where we have enough of them to make it practical. Mages don't grow on trees, and the town guard doesn't pay well enough to keep them around. You may wish to consider the budget before making grand plans to expand the guard. Prince Fahad warned. Excellent point. I will run it by Alexis. She's got a better grasp of the budget than I do. Fahad took a long swill of the strong liquor, then sighed wistfully. You know you've got it good, don't you? If my wife was half as capable as your Alexis, I would have far less white hair. A decade she's been training to become queen already, lessons every day on top of a lifetime of grooming, and still, it's better that I have staff handle household affairs, or she'd frustrate me to an early grave. Dominic winked at him. Then we had best not mention this to Prince George. Fahad laughed quietly. The Midfield prince was far too young to be as bald and white-haired as he was. But in his case, it was far more from stress than a troublesome wife.